Welcome to BamfordRose and another question of the week. This week we're trying to link any gremlins that your car might be experiencing, if it's sport shift, jumping out of gear, not going in gear, or any gremlin, either electrical or mechanical, which instead of due to any component failure is actually due to previous works, and perhaps because that's spurious. By spurious I mean either the parts aren't correct or the garage doing it isn't really recognised in the Aston world for repairs, and the repair being done is a little bit of a stretch too far for an unrecognised specialist. This would be something like a classic Vanquish and trying to set up the gear position sensor if the garage didn't have any AMDS or real built-up history working on that car. And the point of learning from this experience on a particular car is if you're at point of purchase and you can scrutinise the paperwork, the history of the car. In your own mind, if you can see invoices for routine work that's servicing, that's great. But there might be something in the history which is you recognise as a bit of a bigger job, and you think really that should be done by a recognised brand specialist, and if it was done somewhere generic, it's a little bit of a cause for concern. That might prompt you to just road test the car in a certain way to check out that repair was okay, and it could be that the job has been done perfectly well. But sometimes, and especially the job that I'm going to be talking about on a car that happened, it really is beyond any non-brand specialist to perform this job, and the incorrect procedure of this job is probably leading to a few gremlins that the car is being subjected to. So when someone phones up with a problem, to start with, the detail of the symptoms is all quite basic, and in this particular instance the phone call started off where the V8 Vantage Sport Shift would work okay in paddles going through the gears, but when it was in ASM mode, this particular car wouldn't come out of second gear, so it just stayed in second gear. So on that very basic info, I then ask pertinent questions, and this tends to drag a lot more history out that the owner either didn't realise was significant or didn't think of themselves when they presented the problem to me. So on this particular problem, okay, it will go through gears on paddles okay, but will not come out of second gear when it's in auto mode. So based on experience, it's going to be one of several things. Faulty tracker, we know that the tracker gives out spurious signals and creates all sort of electrical haywire going on around the rest of the car. So first thing to check, is the tracker connected, is the tracker faulty? The next is going to be a faulty transmission control unit. Next is going to be clutch wear, although it probably shouldn't be anything to do with that if it's going through the paddles okay, but is the clutch hovering close to a limit, a threshold, and is that stopping gear shifting? And is the gear position sensor, everything to do with the ASM pack, all set up correctly? So with this particular fault, that sort of analysis jogged the memory of the owner, and he remembered that in his prior service history he had an invoice from somewhere non-Aston dedicated, which apparently was entitled gear position sensor change. So the gear position sensor is the magnetic position sensor on top of the gearbox where the normal stick shift would be, and this is reporting back the position fore and aft, side to side, what gear you're in, what gate you're in, back to the transmission control unit. Now I said, okay, well, who did that work? Because that's a pretty specialised job. There are some independents that won't be able to do that job because they haven't actually got the AMDS kit, and they haven't got the knowledge. Normally sales outlets, normally motorsport people trying to have a go at being a road car specialist. So he said, well, no, it was a non-generic place, just a normal garage, nothing specialist, nothing dedicated on Aston. I said, well, okay, this is quite strange because that's a real complex procedure to take the gearbox out and renew that sensor and program it back in. I said, you know, all right, how much was the sensor? How much was the part? Well, he said it was entitled gear position sensor on the invoice, and it was something like £250. Well, the magnetic position sensor costs way more than double that price, so they could not have replaced the gear position sensor. And even at £250, you can't get a clutch slave cylinder that's got the clutch position sensor on for that money. That's £400 plus. So at £250, it really questions exactly what they've done. I said, okay, well, what was the labour charge? And it had listed, I think, a couple of hours labour. To change a gear position sensor, it needs the gearbox dropping, and with gearbox drop, sensor refit and reprogram and reinstallation, that's going to be no less than 6-8 hours work. And if it was a clutch slave cylinder, you've then got to take the torque tube out, so you can add another 2 hours for that. So there's no way at 2 hours it could have been anything to do with the gear system, because obviously at 2 hours the gearbox has not been removed. So if I was looking at this car at pre-purchase inspection and I was going through invoice by invoice the history that was available, that would really stand out to me, because it just doesn't stack up. Something spurious has gone on there. And surprise, surprise, shortly into ownership, it's experiencing gear changing gremlins. So there's obviously something going on. These Astons are intuitive to work on. They come apart easily and intuitively, and some repairs for well-trained mechanics are quite easy, quite simple, quite straightforward. But there are a number of activities that need special parts, special kit, special know-how, and if somewhere non-dedicated did these jobs, that's a real eye-opener. It's often that we've seen cars that have done the rounds around a few garages before coming to us with a problem that has not been able to be fixed by whichever garage at the time was trying to fix it. So if you're going through the invoice history, you know, if there's a succession of sort of related invoices from different garages, and there are components which you think, well, that should have really been done by a brand specialist, then those are certainly things that should cause attention, should cause you to look deeper into it, because you don't want to buy a car that's harbouring a niggle. 10 years ago, when we first started in the Aston world, then it was the situation then where it was sort of an eye-opener getting a car outside the franchise world and into the independent world. But you know, we established ourselves, got a good reputation, and now 10 years on, arguably the better place to service and repair cars is the independent world as opposed to the franchise world. But now 10 years on, we can see that the eyebrow raiser is, instead of someone going to recognised independent, it's going somewhere generic for jobs which are actually more difficult now because the cars are aged and you've got deterioration to take into account as part of the job, making tricky jobs even more trickier. So not just checking out spurious work at point of purchase, it's also worth thinking about a garage that you take certain repair jobs to. I got called up the other day for someone with a classic Vanquish wanting us to do a magnetic gear position sensor upgrade. So this is something that we do on the classic Vanquish regularly, and going from the old mechanical style potentiometer gear position sensor to a magnetic gear position sensor as was built standard for Vanquish S really does transform the operation of that paddle shift gearbox, makes shifts much faster, much smoother, and also makes the whole system much more reliable. The older style mechanical potentiometer sensors were prone to failure, getting stuck, meaning that it didn't report back correct gear position and the system went into limpo. So the magnetic upgrade is a really, really good thing to do. So it's quite common because, you know, Vanquish owners, you know, really know their car, they're enthusiasts. So they know the details about that upgrade very well. The kit is a fixed price, and we've done it enough times to fix quote the labour out. So that job can be fixed price quoted out and is a well trodden path for us. There's no surprises in doing that job. So when I said yes, we can do that job, and it come on to making a booking, it was, oh no, I'm going to just bring the gearbox down to you, so you can put the magnetic position sensor on. So no, it doesn't quite work like that. You know, you need to have the gearbox off the car, but you need to connect it with the hydraulic and electronic harness extension kit, so you can program the position sensor offline of the car and record the data back to the trans controller, and then put the gearbox in the car and check everything dynamically when it's in the car. Oh, well, we're a garage and we've already done some of the upgrade work. We've taken the gearbox out. You know, we just want you to put the mag sensor in and program it. Now, I'm okay with taking on work like that, but it's not what we're about. We're about making a broken car drive perfectly. We're all about the reliability of that, and that improving someone's ownership experience. It surprised me that somebody who owned a car like that would take a car to somewhere non-Aston specific for a load of evolution work, and part of that evolution work would have been the upgrade to magnetic position sensor. I mean, that bit of work really does need a brand dedicated specialist with a proven history of being able to complete that job. It will be cars like that that in the future, because the job wasn't done properly, develop niggles, and then that niggles are passed on because someone sells the car, and then someone is picking up the pieces of that, and then that will be a conversation with someone like me that then drags out the history, and we realise that something spurious went on in the car's history, which is more than likely causing the gremlin that you're experiencing today. So best way to avoid that, at point of purchase, try and sniff out anything spurious. If you already own the car and you know the job is a little bit more technically demanding than changing brake pads or filters, then you really need to do your homework and go somewhere that has got proven history in doing that job. And in many cases, because the non-dedicated brand specialist is going to reach a point where they have to hand the job over to a dedicated specialist, I think it's a false economy in lots of ways by taking your car to somewhere that's non-brand dedicated in the first place. Owners and garage owners like us, we're all okay with the principle of the cars coming away from the franchise network into the independent world, but coming away from the independent world to go non-brand dedicated garage when the job is tricky is only asking for problems. Hope you enjoyed that question of the week, and we'll see you on the next one.